Over the weekend, I got to play MediEvil at Fan Expo Toronto 2019. Let's get into it.
Whoa!
What's up guys, Canadian Guy here, and I am back after my amazing trip to Fan Expo Toronto 2019. My beautiful pregnant wife and I decided a long time ago that just because we are parents, that is not going to deter us from having fun. This year was Fan Expo and we go every year, and this year was no different. So, I strapped David on my back and we went to Toronto for 2 days. While I was there, I got to play 3 games: Final Fantasy VII, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and of course, MediEvil. Make sure to be subscribed because I'm going to be talking about the other 2 titles over the next few days. The MediEvil Remake is definitely one I was shocked to see announced back during the PlayStation experience in 2017. But when I picked up the controller and walked out of Dan's crypt, I actually started to understand why. See, the game came out around the time the happy-go-lucky platformers like Crash and Spyro were going around. Though this game is sometimes bundled together with the nostalgia crew of Crash and Spyro, it actually is an RPG more than anything, with a different kind of take. See, it takes the look of your stereotypical Halloween tropes, like skeletons and zombies and pumpkins, but then actually makes it creepy and not, you know, school-time cringe. The first thing I noticed when Dan had woken from his heroic death, the controls immediately felt a lot sharper. Inputting commands felt good and had impact. The other thing I noticed right away was how much the game had been overhauled. I still get shocked when I look at the old footage and compare it to the new, even though there's not much new footage floating around, but hey, I already explained that in my previous MediEvil video. The game, however, though has snappy controls, actually did feel like the original. At least to what I can remember. When you walk out of Dan's crypt and start dealing with Xerox Undead Horde, you agree with the exact same amount of challenge that you had to deal with in the original game. For those who loved how hard the original was, the remake does not lighten it up. I even had gotten a game over once or twice during the demo. One of the first things I noticed when Dan wakes up is that the voice of the gargoyle sounds exactly the same. Like if Other Ocean came along and told me that they had a program that they took the original voice actor's lines and was able to HDify it to the result, I would believe them. The inflections and even pauses are almost identical. It's borderline scary how good they sound. Then, Sir Dan himself, even though it sounds like he is talking nonsense with a bucket on his head, which, you know, is actually happening, sounds as lifelike as a dead failed soldier could sound. The music as well continues the same vibe carried over from the original, except when paired with the new visuals, it almost has a mystical vibe to it. Also, the game has quite possibly the best color blindness accessibility that I have ever seen. When you activate colorblind mode, it actually asks you what kind of color blindness you have, followed by a slider to determine how intense it is, which is something that should be given a round of applause for. However, though I enjoyed the demo I played, I have a few outstanding issues that I hope gets resolved. Of course, this is an earlier build and not the final game, so there might be a bunch of things that need to get fixed as I have no idea when this build was made. But my first issue was collisions. Though, yes, this is from the PlayStation 1, I wish the collisions overall were improved. Sometimes you can get a bit stuck on corners or driveways. Sometimes you can get a bit stuck on corners of doorways, and it can get frustrating when trying to run from zombies. But there is one overarching problem that ties into another minor issue that overall kind of blends to be a bit of a bump in the game. See, as I was running around and slaying zombies, my eyes started to, well, hurt a little bit. When I noticed this, I took a step back and decided to figure out why. The first thing I did was turn to the PlayStation rep and ask her how many frames the game was running at. She talked to someone and she told me 30 frames per second. So I realized what was happening. Remember the motion blur for Spyro Reignited? It seems a very similar technique was being used for the MediEvil demo, and because you're swinging the camera everywhere and fighting hordes of enemies, it can make some people feel a little sick. Of course, the PlayStation rep may be wrong, or it might be running 30 frames on a base PlayStation and 60 on a Pro, but I was not told what kind of PlayStation we were playing on. Speaking of camera, the camera is probably the worst thing thus far in the demo. It was quite janky and a bit messy at times. In the original MediEvil, it had a lot more of a top-down look, while in the remake, the camera has been brought in much closer to Sir Dan's back, almost looking like God of War, making the camera a bit harder to handle than the original. So Imagine motion blur with a bit of a janky camera closer up than in the original game. It definitely caused frustration in some moments. Perhaps a choice to have the camera like the original might be a good option as well for diehard fans. Overall though, I am very pleased with the demo I played. I cannot wait to pick up the final version of the game later down the line. I just hope these few issues can be resolved by then. By the way, a huge shout out to my Patreons and sponsors on the channel. I appreciate your support and letting me be able to do this full time as I got a family to feed. If you want to support the channel, the Patreon is in the description below, and be sure to subscribe for more nostalgic content. And while you're at it, why not check out another video I recently made? Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.